All right, well, welcome to Designing Your SharePoint Server 2013 Enterprise Deployment. My name's Steve Walker. I'm on the SharePoint Customer Advisory team.
And I am Luca Bandinelli, and I'm also in the product group as a program manager between product group and services in Microsoft Corporation. So the agenda today is to go around the new functionalities that SharePoint 2013 is providing, and we will cover information and lesson learned we got from the cloud, and we will provide this lesson learned as a best practice that you should follow, and you will understand why during the presentation when you design and deploy SharePoint 2013 on premises.
Yep. So first, we got a few assumptions that we're making. We're making the assumption that you're deploying for an enterprise scenario. This isn't a small, small organization. That you want the highest possible availability. That's what we want in SharePoint Online, and we think that's what you're going to want as well. And you want the lowest possible maintenance and operations costs. You also want an elastic architecture, something that you can predictably grow with your deployment. Our goals are to provide the prescriptive architecture for SharePoint 2013 on-prem. When you look at our TechNet guidance, you'll see just how flexible SharePoint is. We have built that thing to have lots and lots of configuration options to meet a lot of different customer scenarios. But what we have found is the more of those options that you use, the harder it is to actually manage your farms. So if you don't have a good reason to do it, then maybe you shouldn't.
Yeah,
and that's,
those options are still all there, right?
They are still there. We're not taking the options away. But where it makes sense, we would like you to simplify your on-prem deployments to align with what we do in SharePoint Online. So why would you want to do that? We think it's the best way to run SharePoint. And what do we mean when we say the best way? I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but we run the biggest SharePoint implementation in the world. It's called SharePoint Online. And we've learned a ton running that thing at scale. We're optimizing our product for that configuration. We also have the highest confidence level with that config. So that thing, because it runs in SharePoint Online and because we have a lot of other customers who are deploying in that type of a configuration, then we know that it gets the most real-world usage and validation. So we're also building features, such as our new app model is one good example, that really rely on you being in this type of a config.
And to be clear, we are not saying that the features will not work on different configurations or different topologies. What we're saying here is that the level of confidence that we got on this kind of configuration and topology we're going to talk about right now is probably the biggest one, simply because that's the way we are running our SharePoint Online infrastructure on the cloud. So the areas that we're going to cover over here are, we will have an overview of the physical topologies and understanding things just like number of machines and farms. And then we will move more to a logical topology where we are talking about web applications and zones and application pools. And then we will talk about some kind of authentications, what kind of things you should consider from the authentication standpoint in order to be ready to the new 2013 functionalities that have been provided. And then we will talk about the new licensing feature that will help you, or actually helps you right now, to reduce your COGS and operations of your farms by being able to have more flexible features, licensing features, functionalities in the product. So in terms of physical topologies, yes. So back to the 2007 days, we had these three different layers. We have the web tier or layer, we have the application layer, and we have the database layer. And you had some kind of services on the application layer where you have your search, and you have some other services, the profile import and stuff like that, which was based on search in 2007. And you were able to add servers on each of the layers based on the number of requests or the number of workloads you were looking for, or your business or your solution were looking for, right? Then 2010 came, and 2010 was almost the same kind of architecture. You had more service. Search was a little bit bigger. Well, a little bit more than a little bit bigger. We had a new user profile application that was a little bit more resource intensive, and we had other services just like management data service or other services that were requiring more app servers in the app layer. So again, even in 2010, you had your web layer, app layer, and database layer. So we will see that in 2013, the concept of layers has not changed a lot. But one of the things that we did, and this is why we want to talk about that before moving forward about the layer conversation, one of the things that we did is that we stopped a little bit and we say, let's try to understand which kind of service that we have on a farm and the kind of service that we have on our product, which service are requiring different kind of latency information and latency requirements, right? So we created these 3 different buckets, and we said, on the left one, you have the critical for most requests, the critical path for more requests, which means that those are the services where you really, really need a very kind of low latency over here. And those are the records management and distributed cache, which are 2 services that we introduced in 2013. They didn't exist in 2010. Then we have the low latency service, which have a little bit more tolerance of the compared to the very low latency service, but they're still looking for low amount of latency, right? And those are the service or the applications that are hit directly by the end user, which is, as an example, the management data service when you have a management data column, or you were doing term store navigation, as well as the session state, and of course the query. And then we have the third bucket where you have the more tolerant latency information, right? More service, which means that you have the service that will work in the background, will work in the batches, just like workflows or timer jobs works, and those are, or even search crawl. Those services are the services that requires not too much low latency. They can live, they can survive, even if you have more latency. So,
and if those services are running slow or running hot, your end users really don't notice that.
You're
right?
correct. There is no perception from the end user perspective. So we created these 3 different buckets, and we sliced the topology across these buckets so that now, depending on the kind of service and the kind of requirements we have, we are able to move the needle and other remove machines on each of these buckets. So one thing to talk about that before moving forward. This is not a capacity planning session. I want to be super clear and sure about here. You are not on the wrong session. We are not talking about capacity planning here. There is a SharePoint 2013 Performance and Capacity Management session on November 13th, which is SPC 192, and Gökhan is presenting that session. And this is where the product group people will go deep dive on capacity planning information. So just FYI. So if you think about this segregation, this bucketization of different services based on latency requirements, you can now see that we kind of have a similar slice and dice architecture or diagram that we had before, but then we have that based primarily on the latency requirement. So we have the router and caching, which is the very low latency bucket, and here is where you have, again, the request management and the distributed cache, which are the services, the front-end services. Those are the services where all requests, no matter if they are robot requests or they are end-user requests, are going to hit the server. So those servers, better to be very responsive and very, very low latency. And if something that happens over there, you have the servers over there, or you remove the servers over there, and you are able to control this kind of services who require a very low latency. Then you have the low latency, which is still important, but again, now you have a new layer that you didn't have in 2010 and 2007 that kind of protect you if the low latency bucket, for some reason, is experiencing a not so low latency, so that the distributed cache, so the routing and caching layer can help you a little bit over here. And here, you have the secure store, you have the query side of search, you have performance point, Visio, and all the other services over there. And of course, there is the more tolerant on latency service, which we referred to before as backend service, where you have all the batches of background services that are still there. If you have more latency over there, the end user is not directly impacted. Of course, if in order to crawl your content it requires several hours, your search freshness will be affected. And if you have some kind of service level agreement on search freshness, that can be an issue. But in terms of the end user experience will not be affected by low latency kind of service over there. Now, we're talking about search a little bit because search has also more opportunities and possibilities for scaling, right? We are talking about horizontal scaling here where, as I said before, you can either remove servers on each of these layers depending on the kind of requirements and functionalities, or if you wish, where the farm is a little bit more hotter.
So I'm getting two things out of this. One, we added a new layer in front of what you would have traditionally thought. We've got this request management and caching layer, right?
Yes, you're correct.
And we've logically grouped our services across the tiers. So if I add 5 more boxes into my front end, I'm going to provision the same services on those as I am across all of my front end machines, correct?
That's a very good point. That is exactly true. We are not making any differences in the services configurations and services enabling or disabling different services in each of the box on each layer. And that's important, just like Steve was mentioning a second ago, because, well, that's another way you are reducing your COGS. Now you are providing a stamped version of your machine, and you say that that machine will always have the same amount of hardware, the same amount of memory, the same amount of CPUs, and you will know that that machine will host the same type of service, and then you simply add and remove servers on that level, but you are not saying that, for example, in the front-end layer, you have 3 machines where WFE and another service, or just like the query, and on the other 5 machines, you don't have the query. No, that will be a problem for your COGS. Will not reduce your COGS. Will make your operations a little bit more nightmare.
So it would increase your COGS because you're going to have somebody with a PhD who understands where you're running your services on various boxes if you choose to go the traditional route.
That's correct. And you may also have some kind of problems in terms of custom solutions or in terms of patching, because you may want to patch the query box first and the other web front end later. So the idea here is normalization and simplification, so that for each of the layer, I want to repeat that again, for each of the layer, all the servers and the hardware configuration and the software configuration of the machines that are staying in that layer are exactly the same. That's a very important thing to say.
Yep.
Now, back to the search for a second. Search has some additional capabilities, if you wish, compared to other services. So we were talking about scale, and we were saying that you scale horizontally by adding a remove machine. Now, if you have some business requirements, just like the new web content management functionalities that we introduced in 2013 that are heavily depending on search functionalities.
Query specifically.
Specifically on query, exactly. Yeah. So one of the additional flexibilities that the search functionalities has is also to scale out by creating an additional layer. So for search, you can also have an additional layer from where you are hosting your search queries functionalities. So that at that point, when you do that, you are moving the search workload or the query workload specifically for search, from the web front-end layer to this new search layer, which is still low latency, and again, all the servers on the same layer will have the same configuration in terms of hardware and software, but they will be specifically dedicated on search.
And there's really 2 main reasons to do this. One, as any of you who have tried to design a search topology will know, search can get much bigger than the number of necessarily web front ends that you would like. And 2, what we have found through our product testing is that having search query on the same boxes as the web front ends can lead to periodic times where some end users hitting certain boxes would see a perceived latency, even though those boxes are operating within spec, so to speak. So if you're going to have a heavy search utilization, you definitely are going to want to split that out. But
correct.
Yeah.
And Gökhan will talk about that in the capacity planning session, but another rationale or another point that you may want to consider when you move from the search service in terms of queries from the web front end to to the new layer is also memory consumption and memory constraints between the web front ends and the query roles, because both of these roles are very hungry in terms of memory. So there is a balloon over here. On the 13th, 9 a.m., we have a SharePoint 2013 product line architecture session. And the product line architecture is, if you wish, our Microsoft offering for Microsoft services as well as partners to provide information and data-driven documentations and templates on how to deploy projects, SharePoint 2013 on-prem, by following such kind of architectures that we are learning and will continuously from the SharePoint Online.
That's right. As you'll notice, again, very flexible product, but even you'll see coming out of services, product line architectures, we're trying to standardize as much as we can the configurations that our customers run. And this is to help them help themselves. We've learned this from many a support case and many phone call with customers. So another thing that we want to definitely try to get the message out on, pretty much everyone who goes and looks at our TechNet content right now and you tell yourself, hey, I'm a big company, I'm an enterprise, I need some of that multi-farm goodness. I'm going to set up a service farm. I'm going to set up a content farm, a MySite farm. Oh, heck, I need a MySite farm over here in the other side of the world. I need, and you end up with this sprawl of farms. That adds a lot to your complexity from a patching perspective, from an ops perspective, and just from a general overhead perspective. So we really want people to start thinking along the lines of, I have a single primary content and services farm. So the kind of your first farm and the farm that's going to be where a majority of your workload takes place, that's going to be your primary. And then you would add satellite farms based on the business requirements or the governance needs. Because there are still a few, and we'll talk about a few of them in a minute, but there's still a few places where you may have a very valid and justifiable business reason to have that additional farm. But make sure you have that valid and justifiable business reason. Don't just start out and start with a services farm and a split content in my farm as well. You are doing nothing but adding to your cost and your complexity. So this greatly simplifies your operations and your maintenance and patching for all but the most complex environments. And you also have a predictability in your sizing and capacity.
So, to be clear, that's a logical definition, right?
Yep.
There is nothing in the product that is called primary farm.
That's right. That is totally a construct that we have come up with. And you will start to see some of that come out in our guidance, especially around the product line architectures and some of the new guidance that's going to be coming out on TechNet. We're working with our UA folks. I see a few of them sitting down here in the front to get that guidance out to you guys. So I actually this is straight from our 2013 topology design that's out there right now on TechNet. So again, if you go look at TechNet, it really steers you towards this multi-farm design. Absolutely still possible, absolutely still valid, but how many farms do you want to patch? How many do you want to upgrade? So we look at this topology here and we see that we've got an enterprise services farm, we've got a MySite farm, I've got 4 content farms, and then, oh yeah, Office web apps are out there by themselves again. That's not part of SharePoint anymore. So if we think of this as a primary services and content farm where I'm placing my and my general collab as well as my services in my primary, I've got 4 farms rather than the 6, plus my Office web apps. So just that move alone, 1, logically it's easier. You know you've got this primary farm. 2, I have less farms to manage, to patch, and to maintain.
So you still have content farms.
Still have content farms.
And I still need for those content farms to consume services from another farm. But what we are saying really here is that instead of having on your HQ or on your main place 2 farms, one other content farm and a services farm that will serve services to all the content farm, what we are saying here is that let's combine the content and service farm to be a primary farm that will serve service to the locally and also expose services to the other content farms.
That's right.
I see.
So nothing prevents me from consuming the services I provide from my primary farm in these satellite content farms. So what would lead you to have multiple farms? You really want to think about this. You really want, when the business comes to you and says, oh, but I just want my own farm, you want to make sure that they understand what their business driver is and if they're willing to incur that additional cost, right? So what are some of these reasons? One, maybe I have a physical isolation requirement. Sometimes there's no other way to achieve it. If there is a requirement that says this data shall never touch that data, then there's times where you may actually need a content farm out there. Legacy applications. So you want to keep your primary farm pristine. You don't want to allow just anybody to be installing full trust code on those things. So you may actually say, hey, I've got this legacy application that was written using full trust, and I do not want to put that in my primary farm. We'll see some of that as we all try to adapt to our new cloud app model and move fully away from these full trust solutions, because that's all of our goals, right?
Right.
And then geo. So there are times where you may have little to no bandwidth at some remote location, and you need a content farm out there.
And we want to be clear here, right? Nobody's saying that full trust code is evil. We deprecated full trust code. You will no longer be able to run full trust code in 2013. Absolutely not. Whatever you were able to do in 2010, you can still do it in 2013 on premise. But, I mean, great power comes with great responsibilities, right? When you do that, the amount of time that it will probably take to you to test your full trust code when a new patch comes or when a new service pack comes, as well as a new version of the product comes, may A, increase your cost in managing those farms, and B, which is most importantly, for some other reasons, may delay your ability to keep up with the cadence that Microsoft has in releasing patches, in cumulative updates, or service packs. So, I mean, you can do that if you want, but keep that in mind that by doing something like that, you may incur in some of the problems. And we are learning that in the hard way, and we learned that in the hard way on SharePoint Online, where we saw that for some of the functionalities that we were thinking about, even internal functionalities, we were starting having COGS problems in updating the servers and updating the farms because of some of the full trust code or even partial trust code that was there, right? So you can do that. Or you can do that on a separate farm and keep your primary farm as clean as possible so that will be the one that stays up and can be updated more frequently based on the patches cycles that Microsoft releases.
That's right. And for those of you that know me in the room, know that I have done all kinds of things with full trust solutions in all kinds of places and know their value, but I also know that there's a lot of additional diligence and operational process that you need to put around that so that you can trust it, so that you can upgrade it. I would never take a full trust solution from random developer that I had never met before and install it in my farm. That is definitely risky. So again, we're not taking them away, but you definitely want to start thinking about and quantifying the number of those that you have and potentially even segmenting them. All right, so we've talked about the physical topology, how you want to have your services and your servers, and now we want to talk a little bit about logical topology, okay? I'm going to call this the legacy topology, and that's everyone runs multiple web apps. You need isolation, I give you a web app. You need different URLs, I'll give you a web app. That really was kind of the model that we used to use starting in 2007. 2010, we came up with this thing called hostname site collections. Still had a few gaps there, but we really feel like we've closed those gaps in 2013.
And let's be honest, right? That was the recommended way to deploy SharePoint 2007 and 2010, right?
Absolutely. So those are the folks in the room that are saying...
Not some crazy guy in the basement doing some kind of strange designs. That was coming from Microsoft.
That's right. And you will see that from our guidance. You'll see, hey, this is a lot of places in TechNet. We told you to do this. And what we're saying now is we've learned a better way and we've built a better way to actually get the same type of a farm to scale. Every one of these boxes that we see up here on the screen is a web application with an application pool, okay? Every application pool has to do what? It has to load all of the assemblies from SharePoint into memory. It has additional overhead for the IIS. goop that it drags around with it. So you'll very quickly hit scale limits on how many of these you can run on a server farm. Because as you guys know, you can't really control which ones run on which boxes. They just all run on your content farms, on your web front ends. So caching of just common assemblies alone is significant overhead for taking this route. And it leads you to a multiple farm architecture very quickly, not because of throughput, not because of scale from a storage perspective, but because you're running out of the physical memory that it would take to actually host this number of websites on a machine. So the recommended logical topology moving forward, 1 IIS website, 1 application pool. Wow, I thought I'd get revolts from that. So we know from running this thing in our service that this scales orders of magnitude better than going with multiple web applications. There's some things that we have to learn to do differently. You can't just randomly let people put things in your web config files. You need to be real careful about how you manage these things. But with our new hostname site collection functionality, well, it's not new for 2013, but enhanced hostname site collection functionality, you can achieve what you're after, which is logical separation of these things, while still achieving a higher level of scope and scale for the farms that you implement. So you'll get more throughput, you'll get more bang for your buck.
And these new functionalities, just to a brief recap to you, are so now starting from 2010 Service Pack 1, I believe, but still in 2013, you are able to use the managed path that you created at farm level on each of the host-other site collections, so that you can create host-other site collection and the same managed path that you created in central admin will be available in all of these site collections. And then in 2013, you are now able to mix and match HTTP and HTTPS site collections in host-other mode on the same web application. So you no longer have the requirement to have HTTPS at the web app level, at the SP web app level, and even at the zone level, but you can mix and match different site collection in terms of protocol, HTTP versus HTTPS on the same web application. So let me ask you a question, Steve. 1 SharePoint web application, 1 IIS web application, 1 app pool, multiple host-other site collection. Is this how SharePoint Online runs?
This is exactly how SharePoint Online runs.
Please.
We have thousands of tenants running in farms with terabytes of data.
And each tenant has multiple site collections.
And each tenant has multiple site collections. They have their My Site host. They have personal site collections. They have content site collections. They have publishing sites. And we run that on a single web app. Single application pool, because that's how we can make the most efficient use of the memory and the machine resources that we have. We've invested fairly significantly, I would say, in SharePoint this release to make sure that that is secure, that we can trust that, and that we don't have issues. So.
Good.
All right. So to recap, 1 web app, 1 zone. Have a good business reason why you would deviate from this. I'm not even going to go through any of the other reasons that might lead you down this path. You should resist that. If you can, use 1 web app, 1 zone. And then also use hostname site collections. So this scales better, reduced resource consumption, and it also still allows you to mitigate cross-site scripting risks, the same as multiple web apps. So those of you who know, there is a risk in My Sites. If you had the My Site URL be the same as your content URL, there could be some particular risk of a user uploading some nefarious script and getting another user to click on that and run that under their context. So you can still use a separate URL for your My Site host so that your personal sites are isolated, but you would just have a hostname site collection as your My Site host with a different top-level URL than the content.
And again, no panic. Stay
calm.
Panic. This is a recommended best practice. Everything is still there. You want to create multiple web app? Sure, you can. You can have multiple zones on a single SP web application, which means multiple IIS web applications. Sure, you can. Do that with your WiseEye opens, mean that you know possible risks not in terms of product risks or functionality risks, but in terms of increasing in COGS and operations. We are telling you that we are learning from the biggest SharePoint deployment, which is our SharePoint Online, and that is why we are running our SharePoint Online. Is an option. If we do that, you can do that. You have different business requirements. You can still use multiple web application node zones, but you have an option now.
That's right. But don't expect the product group to be investing heavily in allowing you to run more websites and application pools on those boxes. That's not the config we're moving towards. So just keep that in mind.
Okay. I'm seeing a lot of people panicking when you said that. Let me say that in a different way. Of course, if we have problems and there are bugs and there are some kind of malfunctions, there will be investments and there will be fixes. What Steve is saying here is that we will invest in terms of additional functionalities and improve the functionalities on these configurations. So,
well, but it was a common ask, right? When I was in the field, they would say, "Hey, I'm doing big .coms, and I want to run 75 web applications on these servers." Sorry, you can't do that. You don't have enough physical memory, right? So we're going to have to split this into multiple farms. That was a common request through the 2007, 2010. What I'm trying to say is we're not going to invest to fix that.
Yes. As a matter of fact,
that particular thing.
As a matter of fact, we invested in documentation to say in 2013 that we only support up a number of web applications per
That's
farm.
right, 20.
It was something we didn't do in the past. So yeah, we are investing in a different way.
Yes. So not trying to scare anybody, just trying to make sure you understand where our investments are. For those of you who've already picked out the elephant in the room here, our self-service site creation in previous versions did not allow you to create host header site collections. What does that mean to me? Well, we've added some capability here that will help you through this. Is it 2? All right. Okay, so I'm going to go with the vein of everything's in the cloud, and this is a look at our SharePoint tenant administration. This is also available on the on-prem configuration. So if you go into central admin in an on-prem farm where you don't have multi-tenancy enabled, you'll have these same options. And you'll notice that I have the option here to start a site, and I can either hide the link so users can't create a self-service site themselves, or I can show the link, I can tell them where to create the sites, and then this nifty new feature, which is one of my favorites, use the form at this URL. So you can insert a URL because you're going to be investigating this new wonderful app model that we have. You can host a application out in Azure, so to speak, and have it actually call back into SharePoint to do your site collection provisioning. So through the, if you're in the cloud, you can use the Microsoft Online Tenant Administration CSOM capabilities that we have, and you can actually create your site collections that way. If you're on-prem, you have a couple of different options. You can either remote PowerShell or write web service calls to actually do your hostname site collections. So what we have found, and we hear this from customers a lot, hey, I want to do all this custom stuff with site provisioning. We could spend the next 100 years trying to build a site provisioning engine that would meet all of your requirements, and rather than do that in 2013, we give you the ability to build your own. In a predictable manner, you can define the URL for your own custom site provisioning form in one place. So personally, I think that's really good stuff coming from a WCM background. Anybody else who's been down that, you're down there messing around in site definition land. So that's a scary place to be. So that URL affects everywhere where the new site URL shows. And let's see if this works. We've had internet. There we go. So that looks like it's hosted within SharePoint. This is actually running in Azure. And uses the tenant admin CSOM APIs that are exposed to create the site collections. So you can put whatever kind of logic, whatever kind of workflow or approval that you need to have your end users fill out. It could be based upon the business division that they work in or whatever requirements that you've got. Then you can have full control of that. So With that, I will flip back to the deck and turn it over to Luca.
Yep. So let's talk a little bit about a couple of things that are key changes in the new SharePoint 2013 functionalities that is something that need to be ready and need to think about when you design your on-premise farm for 2013, especially when you want to get some of the new functionalities, just like the ability to do hybrid between on-premise and Office 365, just like hybrid search, or if you want to have a farm-to-farm conversation for things just like talking to Exchange 2013 as well as OWA, right?
Yep.
So first and foremost, in terms of authentication, the recommendation, again, you can still do other functionalities, you can still have multiple zones, but the recommended way, which is the way we run SharePoint Online, I want to say that again, is to have a single web application with a single zone configured for the different authentication methods that your business or your solution requires. That was a feature we introduced it first time in 2010. I presented with Venki in 2009 here at SharePoint Conference, which is the ability to have, when you are in claims mode, you have the ability to have multiple authentications or in the same web application, SharePoint web application. Note that now I'm not mentioning claims mode, but I'm saying claims-based authentication, and I'm not mentioning Classic at all. The reason is because Classic is deprecated. This is very clear. We removed the ability to create a new web application, new SharePoint web application in Classic mode in the UI. So in 2013, when you create a new web application mode, the options that are available in UI is only claims, SAML, FBA, Windows, but it's claims only. You can create classic web application by using PowerShell and the object model. It's still there. Again, it's deprecated, which means that the next version of SharePoint Classic will no longer be there. So you can think about this release as a transition release that will help you and will give customers time to transition from Classic to claims. And in 2013, if you're using Classic, there are features that will not work. The new app model, and those are all the features that are based on claims. New app model will not work. The licensing feature that we're going to cover in a couple of slides will not work. So we have documented that on TechNet. So you can do that, but be aware of that.
So what I'm hearing you say is, in 2010, we introduced claims.
Yes.
We said, we got this new claims thing, you should use it. In 2013, we're being a little stronger, and we're building features on top of what we released before, and you should expect more of that moving forward. There are more and more features that are going to be rely on claims.
You're correct. So service-to-service conversation relies on claims. The new OAuth model relies on claims. As a consequence, OAuth relies on claims. Licensing relies on claims, and more will come in the next releases or in the future of SharePoint. Now, you can use Windows FBA or SAML. The issue with SAML at the time we are speaking, which means right now, is that the new app model will require the IPSTS, ADFS, or whatever other IPSTS is, to support work-out domain and for the WS-Fed endpoint. This is something that we are working with the IDFS team to make that happen. Other IPSTSs may be able to provide that already, but if you need today and you need to use the new app model, you may want to use Windows claims or FBA claims for now. I mean, the option is there. You can move forward. ADFS is working to fix this limit or these missing functionalities that the ADFS has, but it's something that you can also already do that with other IPSTSs, or if you want to stick with Windows FBA, the new app model will work. And that's really the only caveat as per today with the new app model and SAML.
Yep.
What about Anonymous? So Anonymous is something that, in terms of being sure that you need extra security information or you need extra security boundaries between a non-authenticated user that is coming in your farm and every other users in your company, the best practice that we are providing here in order to be sure that this boundary sticks and stays in place is that you extend a new zone and you use the new zone for Anonymous.
So I would have I would have one new zone, and then I could use that zone for any of the sites that I needed to enable anonymous on.
That's correct, because we said before, you have a single web application. All the site collections that you're creating are created by using your standard site collections. So you would really only need a new zone for anonymous onlys for a specific kind of business in order to preserve your security boundaries between authenticated and unauthenticated users.
And that's only in the case where the business says, I don't want anybody to be able to hack an internal account from outside.
Well, which is something that the business normally says, right?
That's right.
Okay. But back to conversation we were having before, you can predict that one of the directions that the product group is moving in order to enable new functionalities in the next version of SharePoint will be to enable anonymous on the same zone safely, right? So again, if you stick with the recommended topologies and recommended configuration that we are providing right now, and you will find all these recommendations in TechNet in the next months and weeks because we are working closely with the feature crews in order to make that happen, you will see improvements on this configuration the more and more because, again, that's the configuration we are using to run SharePoint Online. You see a little balloon over there, which means that we have a session which is specifically on authentication. It's called SharePoint 2013 Identity and Authentication Smackdown, and that will happen on the 13th of November at 5 p.m. So if you want more information around the new model, the new OAuth model, the new functionalities, the new claims model, go there. Still around authentication, and these are two very brief but important points I want to touch in terms of topology and configurations. Be ready for OAuth. OAuth is these new functionalities, and in the session I mentioned it before, Steve and Tom will go deeper on that kind of topic, but it's the new functionalities from where you can have a server-to-server conversation and you can move a user identity or token from one farm to another. It's based on claim. The way it works is that you bring 3 or 4 claims from one farm to another to a service-to-service conversation. On the other farm, the token of the user is rebuilt by using the information provided in the call, and then the user identity stays there on behalf of the farm, on the calling farm. So this enables you to do interesting scenarios just like search across different SharePoint farms or across your online farm, SharePoint Online, or your on-prem farm, and having security trimmings happening on both farms and aggregate results from both farms. Or things just like e-discovery across SharePoint 2013 and Exchange 2013, or even OWA, the ability to bring your user identity from one farm to another and represent your identity on OWA. So the way this works, again, is through claims, and these calls use the local user profile application, or UPA, to reconstruct your token through the claims that call is bringing, right? So, which it means that you need to be sure that in your user profile application, there are all the claims of the users that are required on both sides of the story to reconstruct the user token. So this is important because in 2010 guidelines, one of the things that we said was, if you need custom claims, instead of creating custom claim providers on SharePoint, use your IP STS, just like ADFS, to augment additional claims. Now, that recommendation is still valid and still in place. However, when you need to do OAuth calls and you need a token to be reconstructed from one farm to another, the IP STS will not be involved in this dance, if you wish. But only the local UPA will be involved in order to grab all the claims and reconstruct the token from the claims. So you need to be sure that all the claims, group membership, other attributes that you want to use to secure some of the information in the SharePoint side. In Exchange, we have roles that you can use to secure mailboxes or distribution lists in Exchange, are available in the user profile application so that the user profile application can be used to reconstruct the token from this OAuth call. And of course, this is super true even for SharePoint Online. Again, we have sessions over there we have a balloon that is called SPC243, Hybrid Overview, connecting SharePoint 2013 on-premise to SharePoint Online in Office 365, which is a session that you will have on the 13th at 9 a.m. And the way it works is exactly the same. You make a call from your search center on Office 365, and there is a query that happens farm to farm, from the online farm to your on-premise farm, and the farm on-premise reconstructs the token from the claims that the online farm brings. It makes the query and trims the results and brings back to the cloud only the trimmed results. In order to make that happen, you need to be sure that your directory service, Active Directory, or anything else has all the claims, plus you need to be sure that your directory service can be fully synchronized to our Microsoft Online Directory service, so that the same claims and the same attributes will be available on SharePoint Online. It sounds complicated. It's a little bit complicated, but it gives you the ability to do very powerful things that are not available or were not available in the 2010 platform.
And I think one thing to note, and you touched on it a little bit there, Luca, was this isn't just a SharePoint thing. Some of the things that Luca talked about were Exchange things. Okay, so as we move towards being Office 365, you're going to see a lot more features that stretch across the products, and this is the technology that enables that. So definitely want to get a head start on understanding how this works.
Absolutely. So we talked about claims. We talked about the ability to reconstruct the user, the fact that the token travels from one farm to another. Let's talk about the licensing feature. And the licensing feature is one of the new functionalities that have been built in 2013 that uses the new claims infrastructure and authentication, and that is now the default for SharePoint 2013.
So Luca, why would licensing be in a presentation about topologies, and why would this ever lead me to have multiple farms?
Yeah, you should ask this to the audience, but you have been in the field as well, right? But the point here is that in 2010 and 2007, licensing in terms of COGS and operation was a little bit, let me say, challenging, right?
Challenging. Yeah.
You had a company with several users, and it probably had different licenses over there. So you had users with standard licenses and users with enterprise licenses. So how you were able to handle that in 2010 and 2007? The official way, or supported way to handle that was to have two different farms.
Yep.
One with standard users or licenses, and the other for enterprise users and licenses. Because license enforcement and control in 2010 is at farm level. And it's also interesting because when you have this kind of farm level license enforcement, you were in some kind of tricky situation, just like, so where do I put my service? And how do I consume enterprise services from the standard farm or standard farm services for the enterprise content farm and vice versa? And you had only two different licenses. You only had standard licenses and enterprise licenses, which were only SharePoint licenses, right? Everything was around SharePoint.
And this was one of the most common asks we had from enterprise customers in the last release, wouldn't you say?
So let's ask to the audience over here. How many of you have had this problem in the past where you had standard and enterprise users being able to handle on the same infrastructure? Okay, I see a couple of hands.
Yeah,
good.
Quite a few.
Bunch of them. So what we did in 2013? In 2013, we introduced flexibility in the licensing model. So first and foremost, licenses and license check enforcement is per user. It's no longer per farm. That means that you can have two different users in the same farm, in the same web application, in the same site collections, with different licenses that will have different experiences based on the license that the user has. It's based on claims. It means that the token of the user carries a new claims that says that's the license of that user. It's an enterprise license. It's a standard license. We also increased the spectrum of the licenses. It's no longer SharePoint only. Today we also have Office Project as well as Office Web Application licenses, and we will see that in a second on the demo. This is important because it gives you the ability to have a single farm which reduces COGS. And to manage a single farm, and you are able to turn on and off features based on the license of the user. Again, the licensing check happens on runtime. We trim out functionalities, not content, functionalities based on the license that the user has. So with that said, let me flip to my demo box. And this is a demo box that we have over here. And I have a site. So let me connect to the demo box over here. This is a terminal server session. Oh, there is a question over there? So these allow external users to use OWA. As long as the user is authenticated, yes. Which means that, for example, one of the functionalities that we have in Office 365 is the ability to share the properties of the document by inviting, share by email, which means that even if the user doesn't exist in the tenant where the content is, you can share the content on a different tenancy. So yes, that will allow that. So this is the farm that we have here. It's an on-premise farm. It's an on-premise demo. The reason is because, of course, on Office 365, these functionalities is controlled by the robot or Skynet that controls SharePoint 85 of SharePoint Online, which is called Grid Manager. So the first thing that I want to check over here is that do I have a license enforcement enabled, yes or no? So I have a PowerShell command that tells me if the license enforcement is enabled or not, and the answer is false. So I go back here. This is an enterprise farm, by the way. I can show you by going to the central administration, going to upgrade and migration, and clicking on the enable enterprise features, and you can see that all enterprise features are already enabled, right? So I go back to my library. My library, I have several documents. I also have a Word document over here. You can see these new functionalities, which is kind of cool, which means that in the preview of the property panel now I can see Office Web App showing my content over here. I can go back and forward. I can do a bunch of things. I can download, or I can still open. And one of the new functionalities that we have in Office Web Application on-prem and in Office 365 is not only the ability to read content, but also the ability to edit a document by using the rich Word or the rich client, as well as the Word Web Application. So that's kind of cool, nice. So let's go back to my farm, and let's enforce the licensing check by running a simple PowerShell script. Now, after I did that, if I control back, I should see that the license system is enabled. So by default, I now enabled license system, and all of my users have enterprise licenses. But I told you before that the license model is not only in SharePoint, right? In fact, if I check about the user licensing that I have on the system, I will see that, wrong command. I have enterprise standards, but I also have project, and this interesting license which is called Office Web App Edit. This license is not enforced right now, which means that nobody has access of Office Web App Edit. So what do you think is happening over here? Let's go back to my user experience. Let's go back to my library. Let's refresh.
And so wait, the user didn't have to log out and log back in?
Absolutely.
You could totally do this from the server
Yes.
side? Wow.
I just refreshed it. I didn't log out. I didn't close the browser. Simply hit F5. So I go back to my property view over here, property pan. I still have Office Web Application that is rendering and is looking at showing me the preview. I will still open Office Web Application, but hey, look, I only have open in Word here now, which means that the licensing enforcement at runtime, it removed the feature which is the edit in Word. So let's say that I want to enable this feature for a set of users that I have, right? And we said a second ago that we have this ability to set up claims and to say for a specific claim, I want to map a new license. so that I can enforce license on a specific claim. In this case, we are in Windows claims, so one of the claims that I have is the security group, is the security I belong to, right? So to make things easy, let's go back over here, and let's add my license, which is the Office Web App Edit. Let's say to add that, well, let's do that to the domain user, so we are sure that this guy is in the domain user group. So, 2 commands. The first command, which is the SP user license mapping, what it does is that it maps the Office Web Apps Edit license to the domain user security group. And the second command, which is add the mapping, it basically enabled that licensing, which says that now the licenses, control, and enforcement will take a look at that new license to make the control. So, copy this command, paste over here, and then one of the things that I can do here is that I can take a look at the licensing mapping that I have on the system, which is another PowerShell command, because I love PowerShell. And you will see that now we have an identity that has the license Office Web Apps Edit to the claim security group, in this case, domain users. So what do you think it will happen over here? Let's do something very, very weird. Let's me not to close this browser, not to go back to the document library. Simply refresh the page. Do you think it will work? Cross fingers? Look at that.
Look at that.
So at runtime, now I have the licensing enforced, and I have that feature back without being able to do things just like logging on, logging off, reopen the browser, clear the cache. Everything happens in runtime, at runtime. This license functionality is the way we control licensing in SharePoint Online. And now it's also available on-premise.
And if it wasn't for the fact that we had the new distributed cache, we wouldn't have this feature. Just throw that out there.
And I go through, come on, PowerPoint, thank you. I go through several commands, but these are the commands that you are available on the new licensing enforcement functionalities and feature. The first are the commands that enable or disable the user licensing and check if the user licensing enforcement is enabled or not. Then you take a look at which kind of licenses are there. Today we have Enterprise, Standard, Project, and Office Web App. You can arrange that in the future we will add additional licenses over there. And other products will also add additional licenses. And then you have the ability to add, remove, and map the licenses. So licensing enforcement happens at SharePoint level on web parts, web part gallery, templates, and document libraries, which means that functionalities are enabled or disabled depending on the kind of licenses that has been mapped to a specific user or a specific claim. In this case, because we were using SharePoint, Windows Claims Authentication, were security groups. But if you use a role provider in FBA, it can be roles. And if you're using SAML claims, it can be your favorite claim in your custom claim provider. As well as Project and Office Web Application. I want to be clear, when I demoed that before, remember that Sean said that even in the previous session, if you were here, Office Web Application is a completely different farm now. When I was making calls and when I was landing and browsing to the Office Web Application, I was browsing to a different farm. So when I was doing that, under the hood, I was making a service-to-server call, and my token was floating from one farm to another with all the claims that I was providing over there. And by enabling the license check and enforcement, an additional claims that I was providing in that token was my license.
Good stuff.
So with that said, I know that we have a Q&A panel and we can start having a Q&A, but before doing that, allow us to provide a kind of a most probably ask the Q&As that you may have after you took a look at this session. So,
yeah, so a question that's been coming up a lot over the past few days, and you see us pushing towards a single primary farm, and then you're going to ask, can I stretch that farm across data centers? The answer is no.
How many of you have a stretch farm today in SharePoint 2010? Okay, so there are reasons why we don't support, officially, we don't support stretch farm anymore on the product. It's a matter of latency and definition even of the stretch farm. So if you want to have more information about that, feel free to stop by here. We have a couple of people from product group, Dan Winter and Brett Smith over here that will enjoy this conversation for you, but stretch farm is no longer support. So when you migrate to 2013, please keep that in mind. So,
and a few of you guys may have picked out that some of the features that we showed you are at the tenant level. So do you need to enable multi-tenant to do everything that we showed you? The answer is yes, but you only need a single tenant.
I will talk about that in a second.
And we will talk about that more here in a second.
So again, how many farms do we need?
One.
Perfect. With everything over there, services and content?
Everything.
The farm is primary farm, right?
That's right, primary farm.
Okay. How many web applications?
One.
How
with
many
one
zones?
zone.
And what about anonymous?
That's the exception case.
Okay, so if you really need that.
If you really need that physical separation, if you have a hard security boundary, you may still need to extend that web app into another zone.
But be aware, when you do that, the new app model will only be served through the default zone. So if you're using the new app model and you have multiple zones, remember that the new app model calls, the Office web app or the cloud app model, will only be served through the default zone. So let's go back a little bit on the multi-tenant configuration and conversation, right? What is the concept of multi-tenancy versus multiple tenants? We need multi-tenancy, which means that you need to provision the subscription service. And the subscription service is primarily required for the new cloud app model. The new cloud app model relies on the subscription service in order to get and to use some of the data required by the new app model. But the fact that you enable multi-tenant doesn't necessarily mean that you need to have or you must have multiple tenants on that farm. As a matter of fact, the suggestions and best practices will tell you that one tenant is, most of the cases, enough for the amount of business that you need to do. Now,
and we've really given this a lot of thought. And we have that question a lot from customers. Hey, I've got 5 business units. I want to run them as multiple tenants. And just to let you in, we have a huge number of engineers that actually run and support and build the features that we need to run SharePoint Online with 1 million tenants, right? That is non-trivial investment. It is not, you will most likely, I will say almost for certain, not be able to facilitate multi-tenancy with what we ship you out of the box as far as tenant administration goes. You will have a high level of investment if you choose to go down the true multi-tenant route. So we really, really, really strongly urge you not to head down that route. It's a high level of investment in both development and maintenance. Who here has had someone write code and then had to maintain it? There's a cost to that. So this only becomes cost effective, the math that we've done, when your tenant numbers scale into the multiple thousand range. And we won't get any more specific than that right now, but...
Again, we don't pretend to know all of your business. That would be full from us. And we understand that there are specific situations and business requirements where you may be inclined to have multiple tenants. And to be honest with you, the product supports that. You can enable multi-tenant. We have a site definition, which is the multi-tenant administration. Don't expect to have the same amount of functionalities and features that you have in Office 365 and SharePoint Online. We invested a lot of custom code on SharePoint Online that you will have to build by yourself on the product and maintain and evolve and test for patches. So the product is perfectly capable to do that. If you want to do that, you can do that. But remember that the entire session today was around reducing your costs, being able to be more agile in operating and driving a SharePoint farm and installation, being able to maximize the investments on hardwares and topologies, and the multi-tenancy and the amount of custom features you may need to build in order to satisfy your multi-tenancy requirements will toward to a completely different directions. So, is there? You can do it. Think it twice before doing that. Great
point. And with that, we have just a few minutes left, about 9 minutes. We're open to taking questions from the group here. There's some microphones.
Yeah, yes, please use the mic so that we can record the questions. Thank you.
Yep. All right, we'll start over here.
Within a single tenant on SharePoint Online, what's the maximum number of site collections that you can have?
So I want to be clear. In SharePoint Online, we don't have we have multi-tenancy.
Yeah,
So-
he's asking how many site collections
Within a single tenant.
can a single tenant have in SharePoint Online? Have we published that guidance yet?
I don't think so.
So,
I've heard 200.
what's that?
I've heard the number 200.
Well, so there's 300. 300 is actually the
300.
limit that we have in the 2010 implementation right now. We do have the ability to grant a customer more site collections than that, but that needs to be done through engagement with the SharePoint Online team. So if you've got a very large customer who's going to have more site collections than 300, it is technically possible, but you need to engage us and let us know because there's some other considerations about such a large tenant that we need to make sure we understand.
Okay, thank you.
And I can safely tell you that we are supporting tenants in terms of users, in terms of number of million of users. If you count, these are 2 fingers over here. So we are supporting customers that have a lot of users being in SharePoint Online. And
Yep.
you can expect that those users to have all sites, in some of personal sites, and a lot of site collection and content sites. So yeah, we are supporting way more than 100 or 200 site
Yes.
collection in multi-tenant for large customers today.
Great.
Today means in 2013 when the upgrade of the SharePoint Online to 2013 bits will be done. Sorry,
That's
I want
right.
to be clear on that.
Yep, so there is a difference between 2010 2013. We're very much focused on the 2013. So we'll go over here.
Good afternoon, guys. So with this recommendation to go to the one web app and one zone, what's going to be your recommendation behind content databases?
On content databases. So if you'll look at our 2013 guidance, our software boundaries documentation has been published, and you'll notice that our software boundaries and limits for content databases changed from being per web app to being per farm. So I think that might answer the question you're after, right?
What kind of more or less the sizing limitations? You know, we had 200 gigs.
So
I would answer you, it depends on your SLA for backup and restore.
That's
and
right.
upgrade. You can have a significant number of site collections on a content database, depending on the size, and you can have a bigger site collection in a small number. It really depends on your backup and restore, service level agreement, and backup and restore for upgrade. The bigger the site collection is, the more time you need in order to do things just like STS-ADM backup and restore from where you backup a single site collection, right? So if you're telling me that I will never backup a site collection because my business doesn't require that, but I simply backup content database only, and I don't care about, and I have a relaxed SLA for upgrading a content database when I have to run a patch or I have to upgrade from one version of the product to another, you can pretty much significantly scale that. Now, another thing that you have to keep in mind of that is that, and this is also depending on the size of the site collection, is that you have the possibility to move a site collection from one content database to another. It's a supported feature that we have in the product. Be aware that the moment you do that, the bigger the site collection is, the more time is required. And when you do that kind of move, that site collection is not accessible. So the infrastructure underneath between 2013 and 2010 has not been changed. And you have to keep in mind of this kind of information when you do such kind of operational tasks.
So you'll see something very similar in the 2013 guidance that you did in 2010, which is we recommend you keep these below the 200 gig level. That really is more to the RTO, RPO point, but those databases will scale much larger, and you'll see that in the guidance.
Thank you.
Okay, 2 questions, one real quick. Does hostname site collection support AAMs then in SharePoint 2013?
So you have friendly URLs. It is not AAMs. So we have secure site access is actually the new feature that we built for 2013 that enhances the hostname site collections and also gives you the ability to have multiple URLs per site collection, but it does not use the constructs of AAMs as we knew them in 2007 and 2010 to implement that.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
And the second question would be, with the hard line on no support for multi-data center, Office 365 obviously runs and has a failover strategy for multiple data centers. Could you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, so there's a much different, so running SharePoint in a, what we'll call a warm standby, would that be the best way to put it, Brad? Configuration, which is, I have a farm over here that's a DR farm, and if something horrible happens to my primary farm, I can cut over to that backup farm. That is fully supported, has been, and that is how we operate our SharePoint Online. Stretched farm means I am running servers from one logical SharePoint farm, which means config database, in multiple data centers, and that is not what we do for SharePoint Online. So you are more than capable to do the same thing that we're doing in SharePoint Online on-prem.
Okay.
All right? We'll go over here.
Sort of in the same vein, you said we can talk to somebody about the latency requirements. Are they documented somewhere?
So you're talking about the latencies by tier when we talked about the service applications?
No, just latency minimum requirements that you were saying that across data centers, that prevents you from going across data centers.
So we still have the fact, you're talking about the machines within a data center or across data center communication?
Independent of that, what is the latency requirement?
So we still have the 5 millisecond latency requirement within machines in a single data center. So that means that you still need 5 millisecond latency requirements for the connection between the machines in the farm and the machine in the database.
And the latency that you have between data centers, so when you're looking at this from an HA or from a DR perspective, that really drives what your restore point objectives are,
yes.
right? I mean, so you could do asynchronous log shipping. Obviously, there's a risk, and you could do that over a lower latency connection, but there's a couple of problems with that. One, you could potentially lose data, right, if you did fail over to
yes.
that other data center. So I don't know that we're documenting the lowest level of latency there. What's that? Right.
Yeah.
Right. So Brad's point, and Brad's on my team there in the product group, he helped write some of this. So if anybody has detailed questions, we can definitely point you to the guy in the front of the line. We tried to remove a lot of the latency requirements. We're basically saying, hey, put it all in a data center, and forget this whole conversation about latency, because every time we do that, it starts a conversation around the speed of light and really smart people.
Now I want to be sure that you understand another improvement that we made in 2013. There were two primary reasons why you had stretched the farm in 2010. Right? One was failover, high availability functionalities. The other one was, hey, I have people here that because of end user latency, they need to have the web front end closest to my people so that the perceived latency from the end user standpoint is better instead of reaching all my web front end on one side or a single farm side of the world, right? In 2013, we introduced a bunch of features to reduce perceived end-user latency. So one of the features we introduced is called minimum download strategy, which is the ability to render the page in sections and to provide to you the sections that are loading faster so that you really see the page being component under your eyes, and we are not waiting to the end of the page to be rendered before showing the page itself.
And subsequent postbacks, because we've carved the page up that way, actually only sends down the pieces of the page that have changed. So we invested very heavily, to Luca's point, to really try to address the latency over the WAN at the browser level rather than trying to make a stretched farm configuration work.
Right.
But we've lost the high availability across data centers.
I'm sorry, can you speak a little bit?
We have lost high availability, active across data centers.
That's right. High availability is a concept within a data center. Disaster recovery is a concept that spans data centers.
Correct.
So there is no concept in SharePoint of high availability in two different data centers. You're exactly right. Those are two different conversations. And a lot of times when we had this pseudo stretch farm configuration, people were trying to achieve both with one farm, and we have learned through our experience with this product that is not a smart thing to do. There are some people who were able to pull it off and were able to make that thing hum and work. That was the exception, not the rule. we had a lot of problems with customers who got themselves into those configurations and then had issues with database integrity due to the high latency across the WAN. So we feel that for the actually, we feel for all customers, it is in your best interest not to operate in that configuration and to separate in your mind the concept of high availability from disaster recovery. For high availability, Oleg said, for high availability, you need to have a config database in 2 different data centers, which we can't do anymore, right? So we're done.
Okay.
Thank you, though.
Next.
Hi, we're struggling with too many web applications on a web front-end server in 2010 and migrating 2007 web applications into 2010. One of my questions was, do the site collections that have to be able to take advantage of these new 2013 features have to be fully upgraded, or can they run in the 2010 mode in a 2013 farm?
They can run in a 2010 mode in a 2013 farm. The one caveat I will give you is when you are going from, and I'll call it legacy or non-host name site collection, and you want to restore that site collection into a farm that uses hostname site collections, you need to do a site collection backup and restore to get all of the links fixed up. Yeah. But I do believe the running in the 2010 mode is perfectly valid in hostname site collections. We do it in SharePoint Online.
But I want to be clear, 2010 mode is 2010 experience. You are
That's
not
right.
getting new functionalities and features until you flip in 15 or 2013.
Yeah.
Okay. The other thing I had was I saw in the presentation, I wasn't sure, is this feature called host name site collections, or was it called SSA? And is
So
there
those are 2 different things. So hostname site collections, right?
Yep.
And then secure site access.
Exactly.
secure site access?
Yeah.
Is there anything else of another breakout session that goes into more details on that you know of this week?
Let me check on that. I'm not sure about that. Maybe the most closest that I was thinking about would be the security smackdown that I was mentioning before,
Yeah.
where Steve and Tom Winowski will provide information about that. Another Steve, not this.
But if you'll come up and give me your card after or contact info,
Yeah, we can follow up
we
with
can
our
follow up with you.
documentation.
Okay, thanks.
Good questions. Over here.
I have 2 questions. First question is, does SharePoint support an IDP-initiated SAML authentication model?
I'm sorry, is SharePoint part of what?
Does SharePoint support an IDP-initiated SAML federation model?
IDP-initiated SAML federation model. Does SharePoint support it?
Does SharePoint support I need to follow up on that. I didn't
Okay.
get the...
Yeah, I think the right session there is the one that he was pointing out, the auth smackdown.
But if you come back here later, you can explain to me a little bit better what is that, because I missed the words over there. So come here later, we can have a conversation.
Sure. Second question, do you have any guidance on when you will have the issues fixed for SAML and ADFS?
So let me see if I can repeat this back. You can tell me if this is right. You're saying, so when would we encounter the issues that we described with SAML and the new app model and ADFS, correct?
I'm actually wondering when that issue will be resolved.
We do not have a date. We're working with the ADFS team, so we can't commit for other teams' work when that fix will land. But that fix is in ADFS. We are very keen for them to fix it, but or to enable that. I won't say fix because actually it's a scenario they just don't support right now. So sorry we can't give dates, but we'll definitely it's coming, and I'm sure we'll have something in our blog screaming to the rafters when we finally get that guy out. So thanks. Come over here.
Right, so I got a question about the host name. What do you guys call it? Host name site applicate, or where you can specify a new URL using this one web app and one IIS website. What is that called again?
Host
name site collection.
So he's asking what that's called. So it's friendly URLs. So once you create a host name site collection, you can go into the settings and you can define alternate URLs for that site collection.
Yeah.
Is that what you're after?
Yeah. Okay. So with that, what are the limitations of the number of subdomains you can have? Or
number of subdomains?
Yeah. Like let's say you've got intranet.mycompany.com, and let's say you want to have another subdomain which is myapplication.intranet.
Okay. So you want to know how many URLs can I map to a single site collection?
More or less, how many subdomains can you tack onto it?
So you said DNS subdomain? Is that what you're asking for?
Yeah.
More or less, yeah. How many subdomains deep can you go with specifying a new host name?
That seems to me a DNS question instead of a SharePoint question, right? I mean, in the SharePoint, the way it works is that you create a new site collection and you provide an host-header URL. It can be hr.contoso.com or business.contoso.com or collab.contoso.com, and you can keep going and keep going, and there is no hierarchy in the SharePoint database and in the SharePoint tables across this site collection. The hierarchy is a DNS hierarchy that you built, and it really depends on the DNS you're using.
Yeah, so the common thing is it's all contoso.com in that instance. So like if
that's absolutely supported. So intranet.contoso.com and extranet.contoso.com. If you wanted to point those to the same site collection, absolutely you can do that.
Yeah. So what if you wanted, a different sector.intranet.contoso.com? Could you do that?
I didn't.
Like, say you've got another sector that's on your intranet. So let's say it's like sector A.intranet.contoso.com. Can you go that deep? Can you add another subdomain to it, or would that break something?
No, that would work. As far as SharePoint's concerned, that's a resolvable DNS host name, so that's why we call them host name site collections. I don't know what the upper bound is as far as how deep you can go with those.
You still have the 155 limits around the URL, right?
Yeah.
But what about when you throw SSL on top of that? Can you still do it, or
yes?
Because you'll still get a certificate warning at that point, though.
But you would need to map the certificates. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
But again, in terms of SharePoint standpoint, there is no hierarchy across these site collections.
What's that?
Okay. Was there? Sorry.
You mentioned that you lose features when you use an authentication provider other than SAML claims. Just made a big investment in making SAML claims work across an enterprise, but have a group that really wants to now connect to older LDAP directories. I'm resisting it, but the only way to tell them is here's the features you're going to lose.
I'm sorry, I think I said that you're missing feature if you are in Classic.
Yes, and so if they want to go back to Classic or another provider, is it safe to assume it's all of the service applications like search that rely on SAML claims, or are there other apps served by the web front ends that would also lose functionality?
So two answers to your question. First, I want to be sure you understand that moving from Windows Classic to Windows Claims is a sort of a no-brain move. I mean, there is a command that will move that for you. Sure, you will probably have to recrawl everything for index for search standpoint because the identity is different, so that you have to change the information in search. But you don't have to restructure your architect your site, right? Okay. There is a command that will help that. Now, with that in mind, what doesn't work if you stay in Classic? The things that doesn't work that I'm aware of are the new licensing feature, the new app model, service-to-service talk, so things just like Search Hybrid or e-discovery functionality with Exchange 15, Teams folders functionality for Exchange 15, and I believe that Office web application would not work if you are in Classic.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay. A question similar to what the previous person asked. What would you recommend if you need to have sites that are from different domains, so say contoso.com and Microsoft.com, and they need to have SSL security? Would you still recommend one web application? And
yes.
Okay. And
so yes, because now we are able to support multiple recited site collections on the same web application with different protocols or terminations. So you can have mysite.contoso.com being HTTP, and intranet or legal department.contoso.com being HTTPS.
Yes, but what about if you have two sites that need the HTTPS and therefore different domains? So you have for the domain contoso.com and also for, say, Microsoft.com.
Oh, again, there is no hierarchy in the host header site collection mode. You can create authoring.contoso.com and intranet.fabricam.com and mysite.microsoft.com.
Pardon, my mic isn't out, but I think the key is you need to terminate the SSL off box.
Okay, so it would be at the load balancer level that you would terminate the SSL connection.
Yep, so if you terminate the SSL before it actually gets to the SharePoint farm, then you don't need to worry about all the certificate mappings that you need to have in IIS. So that's actually the recommendation we would have in that situation, and then it really doesn't matter.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. It works now. All right, over here.
Yeah, how you doing there? I got a question with regards to the recommendation towards one application, one web app, and one app pool is migrating existing farms where we have multiple web applications, such as my sites has always been a complicated thing to migrate. And how does that work with host name site collections? Can we migrate that? Is there going to be a migration plan for that?
Yeah, so so the question is migrating for customers who are not in that configuration and you want to move them to this configuration, and you can do it. You do need to back up the site collections and restore them into the other farm, and that's a site collection backup, so you can't just do a content database upgrade. So yes, that does complicate your migration if you try to do that at the same time, right? But it is possible to do.
So we don't have a magic switch at the content database level that says transform all the site collection that you have over here from name-based to the host-based site collection. To host-headed site collection. No, you have to do STS ADM and site collection backup restore.
So there's not going to be any provided documentation or recommended migration path? I mean, I would say that at least 90% of the organizations went down the recommendations that Microsoft had about having multiple web applications. So now we're faced with doing this migration and also being able to leverage the new capabilities like the host name site collection, which wasn't available in 2010, which is why we ended up going with these multiple web apps.
No, that's right, and we heard you. We heard our community. We saw what was happening. And we built new features that allow you to get more scale out of your farm and not build these complex topologies. Yes, we understand that does complicate a migration from there. Right now, our migration story really is a vendor play. So if you're doing external, data migration, there's plays there. We have heard the feedback that people would like to be able to do a database attach, but it just did not make the cut at RTM.
And again, you have multiple options. I'm not saying that is easy. I'm not saying that is something that you flip a bit, you can do that. But you can move to host other site collections in 2010 and then do content database detach and attach to 2013, and that will preserve all the other site collections you already created, option number one. Option number two, you can do STS ADM backup site collection and restore. Option number three, you can create an empty site collection on 2013 and do data migration.
Yep.
And that'll work with my sites as well?
Yes.
And then one last thing. Could you clarify exactly when you said something about that custom apps on the app model do not only work with the default application?
When you're using SAML claims, they will only work in the default zone for the web application.
So if you have an application that's running your site and you have it both anonymous and standard SAML integration, whatever that
That's
claims
right.
that. Will it be available? Will it be visible and just won't work?
It will only work in the default zone. It will not work in the other zone.
So will it trim it?
What's that?
Will it trim the links to the app?
You can stop by here after the session. There are other people that are waiting for other questions, but feel free to come here. I mean, I want to follow up with you. I'm not asking you to go away. Sorry, it's that other people that are waiting.
All right, over here.
I'm curious, given that stretched farms are going to be going away, and given that operating a DR environment, for instance, involves operating a separate farm, are you adding any additional features to help with keeping environments in sync, replication, that sort of thing,
So we are not investing in replication. And as far as keeping environments in sync, are you talking about OS and SharePoint level patching, or?
No, well, not so much that as things like configuration, solutions deployed, that sort of thing. Right now, it's a manual process. I deploy here, I have to deploy here, I have to make sure I deploy twice every time. And with a
That's
stretch
right.
farm, for instance, I could deploy once and it would go to both places and I didn't have to worry. So
yeah, so the direction that we're actually investing from a product perspective there, so I understand the situation you're in today, and that's how SharePoint has been, 2007, 2010. And if you continue to use the full trust code and those types of things, then you're still going to have that configure, that issue moving forward. But with our new app model, which is where we're really investing and where we really want to push the customizations, then you would have farms that were fairly vanilla, fairly SharePoint. Everything's in the databases, so you would have database replication or log shipping that would handle all of that for you. And then your applications would be revved independent of that, and they would be hosted, out there in Azure, and they would have their own fault tolerance or disaster recovery approach. So that's where we're going. And during the meantime here, we kind of have to do both, right? We have to do what we've been doing, and we have to move to this new model. So we don't have anything in the short term that's going to answer your prayers, but definitely something we hear from customers constantly, and that's why we're taking this bit of a shift with the way we build applications in SharePoint. Did that help? Thanks.
Back to the alternate URL question. If you got a host header site collection that starts to get too large, and you create another one, can you map it down as a subdirectory within that path, kind of like a explicit managed path?
I don't know the answer to that right off the top of my head.
What's the question?
The question was, if I create a host name site collection, can I create it under another host name site collection,
No, there is no hierarchy
okay.
between host and site collection.
I didn't think so, but I wasn't for sure. But Luca tells me no, so I trust Luca.
So if your content under your domain name gets too large, you just have to split it into a different name.
Yep.
What does it mean?
Same. I mean, if you're going beyond, so you can't do that using non-host name site collections, right? I mean, I can't put site collection foo that has site collection bar underneath it.
You can if it's its own web application.
Say that again?
You can if it's its own web application.
Yeah, but it's its own web application. So obviously that only works to a limited scale, right?
Right. So your model of going entirely to host header site collections does not scale to large content groups within the same domain name.
There will be times where you have huge amounts of content that are too large to fit in a site collection where you'll have to flatten the namespace, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Just a question about the DR again. When we were working with 2010, we went for a stretch farm, primarily because the DR recommendations, when we get to BI-based farms, seem to run out. There's plenty of good information on TechNet about for sort of collaboration farms and synchronization, but when you're getting involved in things like analysis services and reporting services, the providing a synchronization between two separate farms to keep the lights burning, so to speak, was pretty low. So are the recommendations for DR for a BI-based farm, now we're going away from stretch farms, going to be enhanced to include things like reporting services, Power Pivot, et cetera, et cetera?
Okay, so did you hear? I heard.
Come here.
Yeah, why don't you come on up? That seemed like much more than a question. So let's talk about that one. Let's go over here.
If you have, if you're using a separate load balancer like an F5, how does that affect the routing and caching layer of your new SharePoint farm? So we were terminating SSL with a separate load balancer, and that load balancer was choosing which front-end server to send traffic to. With the new routing and caching mechanism, it sounds like that's more handled inside of SharePoint.
So we have, so that's two different things. Our routing and caching layer at this point does not operate on parity with, say, an F5, where you can terminate the SSL off box. There's a lot more capabilities that you have there. We're not quite there yet. What our request management feature was built for, primarily in this release, I'm not going to say we're not going to expand the scope of it moving forward. We use a lot of F5s as well. What it's really meant for is to say, hey, I want this traffic of this particular type, maybe you've got a lot of OneNote usage in your organization and you don't want that to really tear up your web front ends. You want to have a few boxes that'll just run hot doing all that synchronization. That's really what our request management tier is for, is to be able to send traffic by maybe certain types so that, you can segment that off onto boxes by themselves and keep that from impacting your end users. We're not trying to replace F5s.
Okay. And then also if you have global deployment, and let's say we're trying to open up documents in India and we're trying to open up the same set of documents here in the States, you're pushing more towards a single farm deployment. We were actually just looking at moving to a multiple. We're in a single farm now, but India complains they can't open documents fast enough. They can't download documents fast enough. So we were
two things there, and I hear you specifically talking about documents. We already talked about the improvements we made in the browser.
Yes.
We have a great feature that we feel like helps meet your needs there on the document side, which is folder sync, which is our replacement for what used to be, what did we call it last release? We didn't call it Groove last release, but
Workspace?
SharePoint Workspace. So we really feel like that if you have these lower latency environments and you need to do that document, then they should use that folder sync technology to bring those documents onto their machine where they can work with them, and then they can use the Office document upload center to manage conflict resolution when they run into those situations.
Does folder sync pay attention to metadata?
Say that again?
Does folder sync pay attention to metadata?
Folder sync does pay attention to metadata. It does also, yes, it pays attention to metadata. If you want some asterisks and qualifications, you can come up afterwards and I'll chat with you about that. All right? We got one more question and then we're going to have to wrap it up, so go ahead.
With the new licensing, how does it affect non-charitable organizations' licenses?
That's an interesting marketing question that I don't know the answer, sorry. I just run it, I'm capable to answer, I'm almost capable to answer a technical question, no marketing question. There is an Ask the Expert table on Thursday, I believe, where we will have Mark Hashman and a lot of people from marketing. Please bring that question over there.
Okay. And
oh, sorry, it's Wednesday, not Thursday. Thank you.
all right,
Thank you very much.